Uh, Over to you, Frank.
All right. Well, thank you very much for letting me be able to speak today. It's been a journey, and I'm going to talk about a little bit of that journey that kind of got me to this point. But yeah, I am Frank Roberts. I currently work for MAF-US out of Nampa, Idaho, and I live remotely up in northern Idaho near the Canadian border. Um, so for most of my career, 30 plus years, I've been implementing ArcGIS in various forms and various organizations. So about 20 years of that at the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, and then another 15 as a GIS consultant, where I ran a relatively large team of super geeky, awesome, amazing GIS people and implemented GIS for a wide range of organizations, be it the US military, tribes, Arbor Day Foundation, Catholic Relief Services are a number of the clients that I helped implement GIS under. So anyway, and so I'm going to kind of talk about the steps that got me here and some of the really cool stuff that we're getting to do. So just from my own personal story, so I had some pretty pivotal moments. So I've been a believer for, I don't know, 25, 30 years, I think. And so have a wonderful wife, and we had a wonderful, wonderful life going as a GIS consultant, making good money and doing the things that I love. But unfortunately, 8 years ago, my wife and we lost our 5-year-old son to a traumatic childhood disease, basically. Healthy kid, and a month later he was in the arms of Jesus. So it was really, really shocking to go through that, as anybody might imagine, and just awful. But God did carry us through that. And there's a huge testimony just in that. But a number of months after we experienced that, a buddy of mine at church was telling me about his nephew that runs an orphanage in Haiti, and was telling me about how they had a storm there in Haiti and it knocked the power out and there was flooding and things like that. And we have floods and storms in Idaho. That happens all the time, right? The power goes out. But then he was saying, unfortunately, though, at the orphanage where these kids are at, they drank some polluted water and 2 of the kids died. And I said, that, my kid, I had the best doctors in the world, great medicine, great health care. Nothing we could do could save our son. Not that we wouldn't have wanted it that way, but these kids drinking dirty water, like, that can be fixed. Like, some GIS people can buy water filters or do something or whatever, come up with a system for that. So that became kind of a thought in my wife and my mind, is why don't I take and reprogram these 30 years of IT and GIS stuff I've been doing and try to find a humanitarian relief effort organization that I could apply these GIS skills to, and maybe make it so somebody else's kid doesn't have to die or something like that, or use the skills that God's given me. And so that started a thing of me downsizing our house. We sold our big 4,000 square foot house on the lake, bought a smaller house, still have a beautiful house to live in, and got to a place where we could be debt free, and started looking for a nonprofit. And that's where we bumped in. I personally bumped into David Bergman, who's on this call, and I said, hey, these are the skills I have. Is this anything that could be useful at MAF? And David took the bet on, and here I am 11 months later. So what I'm going to talk about over the next few slides here is what kind of stuff we've been working on at MAF. So MAF had a long tradition of GIS. They were actually based in Redlands, California originally, which a particular GIS software company happens to be based there too. So there was some back and forth in the early years of using GIS, but by the time I arrived, most of that had fizzled out. The only remaining kind of piece of information there was some story maps. So, and then thanks, Vincent, for covering this. So a little background on MAF before I get going here. You were right. MAF has been doing the things they do for about 78 years. Betty Green was the inaugural flight person and did just amazing things all over the world. And so, yeah, I get to help support these people. The pilots, mechanics are all self-funded, which is really amazing. So they're raising funds to get themselves out in the mission field. And then there's a headquarters in Nampa, Idaho, where we kind of support those people to do the wonderful things they do, and purchase airplanes and, get things ready for the field, and do logistics around that. So that's the group that I work with. So kind of once I parachuted in, so I volunteered for about 6 months while I was kind of wrapping up my directorship at Innovate. And then I parachuted in come the beginning of January. So the first thing I did was survey the people that were there at MAF. And so, well, how would an Esri GIS kind of person do survey? I created a survey 123 form, and I proceeded to interview around 30 people with this form and just trying to understand, who these people are, what are their systems they're using, who are the people that have expertise in those systems, and then other kind of helping understand what the most important data is to them, because my role there is the global data architect. And so really about trying to figure out how we can use this data to solve problems. And there's a lot of different systems at MAF, probably about 40 or 50 systems that we're looking at. So how can we combine that data and make knowledge out of it? So that was kind of my first, use of the ArcGIS product. And that brought together a whole lot of really great information, which then became the launching point for all the stuff you're going to see here. So the first thing I learned is that the disaster response group was kind of the last folks using kind of Esri story maps. And so here's an example of a story map they made for Madagascar. The story map allows people, so when a disaster happens, be it a hurricane or earthquake or whatever, MAF goes out and they fly their planes and they take pictures just right out the window of the aircraft and map where those photographs were taken, so other disaster response organizations can respond and understand what's going on the ground. So, which is an amazing use of the story map. They make the story map publicly available, so any organization that needs to use it can use it. And it's convenient because MAF has about 40 to 50 planes scattered throughout the world. So a lot of times we have a plane that's in the area, or one of our affiliates do. So there's other MAFs out there in the world. So I work for MAF-US, but there's an MAF Canada, there's an MAF-I international, kind of the European version of it, MAF Switzerland. So there's a number of MAFs, and we work kind of all together as a big happy family most of the time. So this is an example of one of those story maps. So you can see they can click on the story map, they can look at the flooding and things like that. So, so this is kind of the fun part about it is, well, it just so happens that while I was working at Innovate Inc, I actually managed the team at USGS AROS. And USGS AROS is kind of the big satellite collection area in the United States. And so my team at AROS were preparing imagery for disaster response. So there's something called the International Charter, and they make the satellite available for other organizations doing disaster response, such as maybe MAF. So I was able to connect some dots there. And now we're kind of looking at a pilot project where we're still flying our airplanes just like we flew them before, but then being able to have before and after imagery of that disaster response. So this is experience builder map. And you can see as I pan around in these individual panes. So one might be before, one might be after the disaster. This is just mock-up data, by the way. But you can see it pans, it zooms, and then as we zoom in, you can see the airplanes here that represent where we've taken pictures. In addition to be a 2D product, it's actually a 3D product, so we can actually tilt this imagery and look at it in 3D space too. So anyway, so one of the new tools that we're kind of bringing to the table and at MAF using GIS. So, and just to be clear, everything I'm going to show in the preceding slides is really just Frank's prototype. Doesn't mean it's been fully adopted at MAF. Doesn't mean this is the absolute way we're doing this. Means, hey, Frank spun this thing up. We're showing it to people at MAF. There's been a lot of interest, but we'll see if this is kind of what we go with in the years to come. But anyway, these are kind of the prototype platform we're doing this on. All right, moving forward. The next thing that we bumped into is, so MAF flies into a little over 1,000 airstrips worldwide. One of the interesting things that they would say at MAF is MAF is actually one of the fourth largest airlines in the world based on places we serve. course, those places MAF serves are very, very small, but there's a whole lot of airstrips that we serve. And each of those airstrips have a digital, like a PDF that goes with them that helps the pilots know about where the things are at and how they should do the approach and things like that. And so this is an example of one of those maps. Likely drawn and created in Corel Draw or Paint or something like that. And, functional, it's been getting the job done for years. But one of our things we're looking at is seeing if maybe we could use the GIS and generate something that looks closer like to this map you see here. So using the glories of OpenStreetMap and all the open data under that. So buildings are in there, mountains are in there, roads are in there, things like that. So that's been a really nice way to kind of spin up some samples and some things we're kind of exploring right now, and hopefully it's a little bit better product. And then it's a standardized product too. So we'll be using, if we do this, we'll be using data-driven pages so we can bulk process. So if somebody says, hey, we don't really want this to be a green line anymore. We want it to be a purple line. Okay, let's make a purple line and just boom, bulk process all the JPEGs and shove them into the PDFs where they go, where the system they go to. So anyway, a standard way of doing things across the board for all of our different organizations that we serve out there in the field. All right. The next place that we've seen some use of GIS is for landing strip visualization. So we have a lot of pilots in the field, and I mean, they know places in Papua like nobody else does, right? But when a new guy shows up, he needs to somehow learn these places that they fly. And so we're using the Esri 3D models to help demonstrate where the current landing strips are and other information about them. So what you're going to see here is an ArcGIS scene, and then we've embedded that in one of their apps that we can use, so it can work on the phone or it can work on an iPad or your desktop computer. So you see here, so these are the various airstrips we have that we're currently serving today. We can zoom into anywhere in the globe, but then of course we have all this other data that Esri's making available to us. And so we've got the hurricane patterns and things like that. We've got a whole bunch of other layers that we can turn on or off within. So for example, recent earthquakes we can turn on because that's something we sometimes have to respond to. So that's all a live feed. MAF doesn't have to maintain that data. It's just a live feed from Esri to get that information. The other component of this is back to what I was talking about originally is, let's take a look at some of the places that we fly into. So we're going to go to Papua. We're then going to go to a small airstrip called Lumo. And you'll say, this is not like your standard airstrip in America, right? And you can tell that when you use the scene and you click it on its side like this. So it, very remote location, basically launches you off a cliff when you land. But we can tie other information. So where we have these cameras here, we actually have video footage that we can show people. So I'm going to go ahead and click to one of those right now. I believe David, that's with us on the phone, actually took this video. And you can see why it's very important that they land in the right spot here. So one of the thoughts is we could have a collection of these kind of videos and things for pilots to use or marketing folks to use at MAF, and this provides an access point for that data, and then a way to kind of explore other airstrips as we look at them. Other things we're doing is it's actually very impressive what the Esri base map is providing. I mean, considering the location of this and the elevational model, it's really, we've done some comparisons with other places across the world, and the elevation model is really impressive and a good representation most of the time of what the location looks like. But there are other locations. So I'm going to zoom back up to Africa. And we're going to go look at, we do have some pilots that have drones, and we have a couple of drones in possession at MAF. And so I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here. And so this is another one of those amazing airstrips that MAF flies into in Africa. I'm going to back off a little bit so you kind of see it just launches you right off the edge over here. But one of the things that we can do is we have purchased drone to map. That's Esri's drone processing data or drone processing software. And so the pilot had already flown the imagery. And so now we have high resolution drone imagery that we can see for a given airstrip. So one of our thoughts is potentially making digital twins and things like that using the airstrip. I mean, it's remarkable if you go and you look at, they spelt out the name of this place. You know, the individual rocks and things like that that make up the sign are visible within the imagery. So the resolution is really, really astonishing. And this isn't a high-end drone. I mean, it's medium-end drone, a Mavic Pro. So probably like about the same value as a decent laptop. So anyway, another way we're kind of using the GIS to help visualize the places that we fly into and the things that we see there. Okay, moving forward. Another way that we thought GIS could be used at MAF was just providing information to keep our pilots and our families safe in the places they serve. MAF is typically in places because there's nobody else that will fly there. A lot of time that's because of political instability or things like that. So safety is really, really a very important thing, especially when it's not just our pilots, it's our pilots and their wives and their children and things like that that are living on these bases in these remote locations. So one of the things we're working on with our safety or our security group, I should say, is a dashboard. So this is a piece of data called ACLID. So MAF subscribes to ACLID, and this allows us to see where, in this case, Haiti, where activities are occurring. And so we can query the data based on date. You can see this data sets we've been collecting since January. So you can see kind of as things heat up and cool down and heat up and cool down. And we can see, you know, case in point, you know, April of this year, there were 57 fatalities in Haiti because of this kind of violence and things like that. So provides us a means to kind of track where these activities are occurring. And then we can zoom into as we explore things like, well, maybe we should move our base out of, you know, Lagos and into someplace else or into other locations of the world as we look at things, or Port-au-Prince in this case. So we can look at those areas and look in other areas and see, hey, is there less activity there? What are some of the things that are happening? So we can click on any of these icons here and then get a blow-by-blow report of what kind of activities occurred in that location and when they occurred and what type of activities they were. So just another kind of pieces of intelligence and making that available to folks so they can make good decisions. Another thing we're doing along the same lines is the tracking of our aircraft. So this is a brand new functionality. Just this month, we came up with this. We're really impressed, met with somebody on the Esri team, and Esri's been super supportive of everything MAF does. I mean, people have really bent over backwards. So prior to ArcGIS 11.1, you had to purchase and install something called the Geo Event Server, and that allowed you to do real-time GIS tracking of things. So think of like, you know, Uber or whatever, like where's the taxi now kind of thing. Well, with this latest version of ArcGIS Server, you can actually tap into a real-time data feed without Geo Event, which is a huge, I've implemented for other clients. It's a pretty big lift to get Geo Event running. So not having to install that and using it directly with Arc Server is really pretty handy. So yeah, so we're at this point in time, we can track our planes. Of course, being in the Pacific time zone, we're in the wrong part of the world to be seeing a lot of plane traffic right now. But I bet if we zoom into locations, we can kind of see these icons, the planes that are moving, turn green, and you can actually see them traveling across the map as we interact with the map. So just another way of us having business intelligence of what's going on. And then, like with some of the other maps, we've implemented the hurricanes and things like that. So we can say, hey, is there active events or hurricanes that are occurring that may affect, some of the places that we serve? And so just another way we can have intelligence and make good decisions about things. All right, moving forward. So another thing we do is in our airplanes, they do have GPS enabled in them, and those GPSs are tracking where the plane's at and a number of the things about the plane, the oil pressure on the plane, RPMs, things like that. And so this is a tool we have that actually ingests that the Garmin G1000 data is what it's coming from. And we can kind of explore that data and look at how the plane's running, what are the approaches looking like, and things like that. So once again, kind of an experimental data viewing that we're doing here. I'll go ahead and click on one of these points and just demonstrate some of the information behind it. But anyway, another way to visualize that, we're working closely with our safety quality group. So they're the folks that dig in when we have a problem with the plane or there's been an accident. Those are the people that look into it to make sure we don't have those kind of accidents again. And so they're looking at this as a means to help kind of better understand incidents and things like that. All right, moving forward. So another team at MAF that I work with is the marketing group. So MAF's a nonprofit, just like many nonprofits. That means we have to raise money to do the great things we do. And when you're an organization that flies airplanes are $3 million a piece or more. That's a lot of money to have to raise, and working with your donors and helping them stay informed. So in my previous work with Arbor Day Foundation at Innovate, one of the things we created was the corporate partner dashboard, which allowed people to window in and see where their donations were going and making sure that they feel informed and like they're making an investment that really counts for them. And MAF is no different. So one of the things that we spun up over this summer is basically a virtual tour, which I'm calling a day in the life of a pilot. And so we used Esri story maps to produce these story maps. They're available on the MAF website. And they take you through a day or a flight, a virtual flight of one of these remote locations our pilots experience. So I'm going to go ahead and show you this one here. And so we can spin through, it's just kind of down arrowing through the story map. And so we introduce you to Joel. He's one of the pilots that we have at MAF, and give him a little backstory. So Joel originated in Texas, and then so we kind of talk about where he's living now. So we pan the map and take you to Papua, and then we talk about the places that we're going to fly to. So these are the two locations that we're going to do the virtual flight through. And then as we scroll the story map down, we actually take you down to the tarmac. And then we do this. We've done this, I believe, for 9 or 12 different flights across the world that MAF does. But just to kind of give some people an experience about, what does this place look like? What are the things what does his morning look like? He drinks coffee just like we drink coffee or something, right? And then we expose the people to kind of the mission that Joe's on today. So it's a medical mission in this particular case. We get them up in the air, and then basically the pilot narrates kind of different stories about the trip and different things he's experienced, just like if you were sitting in the plane sitting next to him. So, and then we bring the plane in, kind of show the landing sequence, and then get the plane on the ground and talk about some of the great work that MAF is supporting there. And then since it's a marketing, we allow people to make a donation or learn more about giving at this website. So one example of how we've used the story map platform, and then all of these story maps, I should say, are actually loaded on ArcGIS Online because we didn't want to have to worry about server load and things like that. And everything else I've shown you is on our on-premise ArcGIS portal instance, which is a 4-machine setup. So there's a web server, a portal server, a data store, ArcGIS server box. So 4 machines running ArcGIS Enterprise internally. All right. The last little bit of my slides here, I'll talk about some of our drone work. So as I mentioned earlier, drones have been used at MAF for a number of years to collect different data and collect video. So it's not a new concept, but we wanted to kind of see about making digital twins and things like that. So, and then also using that as a means of exploring some of our bases, because where we have a base, we actually have housing and all those kind of things that families would live in, schools, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, giving people the opportunity to understand what that looks like. And then from a marketing standpoint, hey, we need a new school or we need a new building. Can you help? So providing people the insight of what's going on there is another way we might use these drones. So here's actually an airstrip that we flew actually in central Idaho. And so we used the drone to map to sew those images all together and produce the elevation model. And then here is an interactive map that goes with that. And so you can see, you can zoom, you see some of the trees sticking out of the ground and things like that. And then in addition to just having the imagery, the visual imagery, we can also create an elevation model, which is important because most of our landing strips aren't flat as a pancake, right? They're on a hillside, they're sloping. And so having the needed tools to do kind of, like profiling of the airstrip becomes really important. So you can see in this particular case, this airstrip, there's some undulation along the airstrip. So having a means of being able to show that, and this is actually something we're looking at producing into the PDF, is this cross-sectional piece of information is a standard MAF product that pilots get. So using the drone to potentially produce these would be a big improvement for those pilots, just to give them more accurate information. And I see we have some questions coming in the chat, and I think I'm real close to wrapping it up here. So yeah, that was my last slide. So Lauren, do you or somebody else, I'm not monitoring the chat, so if anybody wants to bark those out to me, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, so one question that we seem to have, Frank, is wondering how much of this is publicly available. And so what of this do you feel like could you share to either folks within this group, like privately publicly, or like publicly?
Yeah, so all the story maps are publicly available, and I can provide links to that, or you can go to the MAF website. We're going to make kind of a little website where we can go and show that stuff, quick links to it there.
So I think one thing that would be great is if you wouldn't mind, either you can email me or if you can just reply to one of the emails to the Christians in GIS listserv with the links, then that can get shared out. And then I'll also make sure that that gets put in the description related to this video when we put that on our website. But I think you've done just a really great job at communicating information here and showing some ways that can be done. So thank you for that.
And if it's possible, I would like to include your story maps also on the website. If you can provide us just a selection which you want to have open to the public, then it would also be great to have it on the website.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, they're publicly available now, so I wouldn't foresee that being a problem. I mean, I have to just hand it to Esri. I don't think I would have gotten this far at standing up all this stuff if it wasn't for the Esri product suite being, I mean, admittedly, I've been using it for a lot of years, and we were able to hire a really talented individual that works with us, Cole, to help me put all this stuff together. So it's not just the Frank Roberts show, to be clear. Cole has worked really hard on a lot of this stuff, but for getting into the Esri nonprofit program was pretty simple, a pretty simple application. And 2 days later we were in, and we could purchase, ArcGIS Enterprise for $2,000 or something like that. It was just, I mean, I implemented this for private companies and they would spend $40,000 on something like this. So Esri really has cut nonprofits a really great deal. And then ArcGIS Online is pretty reasonable too, and so is Drone to Map. So we haven't outlaid that much money to get as far as we've got, but I do appreciate Esri's support of the nonprofits in that respect.
Okay, and there's another remark by KY. So he says, this is great. I wonder if we have explored GIS as a storytelling and marketing advocacy gospel tool as much as we have an operations analytics tool. So, and Michael has a question or something.
Oh, was that your question, KY? I didn't want to break in while there was still a question.
I mean, I'm with you, KY. I mean, how many times have we all sat in sermons saying, man, this would be really cool, like in a map or an interactive thing. I mean, you're talking about the journey of Paul or something like that. And you're like, I mean, just putting things in perspective, right? Like, how far did Mary have to ride on that donkey? What was that about? Put that in perspective of, me driving from Idaho to Bellevue, Washington, right? It's
right.
a whole different world when you start thinking about things like that. So I think geography is a key part of telling a story personally.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of us come from an analytical background, so that's what we gravitate towards. But I think we've all heard the expression, a picture's worth 1,000 words. I like to quote that and say a map is worth 10,000 words. But yeah, just a discussion opener that, we as Christians, our ultimate purpose is to tell the world about God. And what could that look like with GIS? That what untouched potential is there that only we can bring out and persuade, and definitely marketing and fundraising is a very important part of that. But what could GIS do that other communication modes cannot do?
Yeah, I guess I can break in now. You guys hear me okay? I have so many ways to mute myself. Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Cool. Hey, question about the drone imagery, like that you're using pretty much off-the-shelf Mavic Pro. What's the resolution that you're normally getting, and how much flight time does it take to gather what you're doing, like with the runway? Is it significant?
I mean, I don't think it's super significant. I mean, I think it's a last time I flew a runway, it was like a battery and a half kind of thing. So probably a 30-minute flight to do like what you're seeing here on the screen right now. And so one of the things that we recently did is we worked with one of the Tremble vendors to purchase a Tremble GPS receiver that would Bluetooth to one of our phones. And so that receiver has a data plan, or has a data plan to allow us to bring the resolution down to 10 centimeter, which for us is, I mean, super impressive. So we actually went out, we did a flight actually at our headquarters in the Boise area, and then re-registered that imagery using about 6 control points. And literally we're just marking stuff on the ground that we can see. Hey, here's the center of a manhole cover. Hey, here's a tire. Here's, and just did kind of the outer perimeter of the collection area. And I mean, based upon that, feeding that data into drone to map, I mean, I think, you know, we're around 1 foot accuracy probably. So it's for what we're doing, I think it's super amazing. We did do some tests, and I could present that at a later point in time, of comparing our accuracy just with no data collection, with no GPS collection at all, and then with just using your cell phone, like an iPhone or an Android phone, and collecting GPS. So we have those numbers, but without that collection, then you're talking, you know, 5 or 6 meters accuracy. But anyway, I don't know if that answers the question, Michael.
Yeah, that helps with the accuracy question. Are you getting, as far as the resolution of the pixel size, is that below an inch or so with pixel?
It's pretty fine. I bet it's, you know, around 2 inches or something. I haven't actually measured it. I guess I could. But yeah, it's
just a curiosity.
Pretty fine resolution. Yeah.
And ask, and this is not something that you have to do or anything, of course. Can you put together like a specification document that has all the equipment you're using to get to that imagery? You know, like specify it's a Mavic Pro, blah blah. I got this Trimble GPS unit. Could you work that up and send it to me or the group? Is that possible?
Yeah, I think we have a processing spec that Cole has created. I could probably share that with the group as long as yeah, I think we have that information already documented.
Cool.
Frank, this is Matt at SIL. First of all, absolutely amazing. I am very inspired by this, and I love how all the different Esri pieces come together to make this possible. And I'm sure they're very excited too, how you've accomplished that.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned somebody named Cole that's helping you, but I'm wondering, other than the two of you, how many people are on your GIS team?
I mean, it's essentially Cole and I, and then we have one other individual that's essentially a data technician with us. Roy Killjoy is his name, and he's helped us. We're actually creating 3D models of the building complex at MAF as a prototype, and so Roy is using SketchUp, and I should have brought that stuff on too because that's really cool also. But yeah, so Cole started with me in around June. And I mean, and the Cole thing is a whole God story, right? Like literally, it's super cool. Like I'm at the Esri Developers Summit trying to install ArcGIS Enterprise, guys. Like I'm on the floor of the, like, why won't this work? You know, but I know I can, there's a guy out in the Esri booth that will help me. So I'm doing that back and forth. And there's this young man scanning people's badges as they go into the developer summit, one of the many, like 50 concurrent sessions. I happen to be next to this room where this guy's scanning badges.
Just happened to be.
Just happened to be. And I hear somebody say, "Oh, are you a student?" "Oh, yes, I am." "Where are you from?" "Oh, I'm from Boise." And I'm like, Boise? And he's like, I'm, you know, something like I'm graduating this next semester or something. And so I call the guy over, and Cole is his name. And I'm like, tell me about yourself. Well, I'm graduating. I'm hoping I can find a job. I'm living in Boise. And I'm like, well, where do you go to school? Oh, Northwest Nazarene in Nampa, Idaho, where MAF is headquartered. So, I mean, total God thing. It was amazing. And we were able to bring Cole on as an intern for a while and convert him to a full-time position with us. And he's been absolutely amazing and really great.
Wow. Thank you, Lord, for the God moments.
Yeah, right.
I do have one specific question. You mentioned about 4 machines running Arc Enterprise. And so can you just kind of describe that? I know you said Portal on one, obviously, and how the other 3 are related to that.
Right. So you can do in a small so back at Innovate, where actually I still I have a role at Innovate, so I'm just all things declared there. One of the things we did was help other organizations implement ArcGIS Enterprise. So you can install ArcGIS Enterprise, which is composed of essentially 4 components. So there's the web server component, which is the web adapter. There's the data store, which stores the data and the maps and stuff in it. There's ArcGIS Server, which actually serves up the data from your enterprise geodatabase like SQL Server or Postgres. And so anyway, those are the components, and you can install them all on one machine. It's recommended probably if you're going to have 50 to 100 users, which we currently have about 54 users at MAF, that you break up those components so you move the processing power across a number of machines. And so that's why I have the 4-component architecture that I've implemented. If that helps, and I can talk for hours on that, but not right now, probably.
Helpful to know. Thanks.
Yeah.
I have another question if nobody else does. I don't want to monopolize or anything. If somebody else has a question, I can go to the back of the line.
I think there's a question from Jerry.
Okay.
Jerry.
Yeah. So
yes.
Yeah. I'm unmuted. So again, thank you. This is the presentation that I was trying to find from Esri to present to the Seventh-day Adventist Development and Relief Organization, ADRA, to try to get them to really take notice of GIS. And you highlighted it better than what I've seen in the videos that Esri made available for me. So thanks for that. My question, though, is when you transition from for-profit to missions, how did you determine what you were going to focus your life on? Because at that point, sounds like you were financially somewhat independent and could pick whatever you wanted. You didn't have to say who would hire me.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really cool, I mean, most of the time when you're in a job search, you're like, oh my goodness, I got to get a job so I can make the house payment or something, right? Or I mean, that's where I started out when I left college, right? I got to get a job so I can feed my family. And it was an amazing opportunity that God gave me just to be able to like, hey, I'm just going to cast the net out there. I mean, I talked to World Vision, I talked to Compassion International, talked to MAF, talked to a bunch of different orgs, and I thought maybe these are organizations that maybe could use my skills, or maybe I could just sweep the floor. I don't know. I'm cool with whatever God wants me to do. And so it was fun to kind of, oh, surely, a gigantic organization like Compassion, they would have a GIS department. Oh, they don't. What, really? World Vision, they would surely, no, they don't have one either. So I mean, I think there's lots of opportunities out there in the future for many of us that are whatever GIS professionals that maybe want to make that move in the future. But it was fun to have God open the door at MAF, and it was just one of those things. Like when I talked to David the first time, and now he's going to get a big head and stuff because he's looking at me here on the screen. But I was just like, man, this is the place that God wants me. I can tell that, just in my heart of hearts. So it was really cool. I'd be curious, David, if you could, I mean, not about me, but just your perspective on GIS, MAF, and what we're doing there, because you have a different perspective than I do.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a great question. And we've bundled GIS under a broader umbrella of data intelligence, data visualization. So whether it's Power BI for some specific analytics, or if there's a context of where or a geography context, then the Venn diagram of Power BI and GIS really overlap. And then we see the power of GIS in its data intelligence. And so it's, I think, like any journey, there's a maturation curve of hey, these are the analytics we use, and then from a technical standpoint, you say, well, okay, what would be growth in that? How do we keep maturing? How do we better steward, continue to seek excellence and in stewarding the resources God has given us? And the GIS element has been a significant accelerant in the desire for that growth. It can be hard to wave your hands or be like, oh, like what if there was something cool? Would you like that? And people are like, I don't know, I having a hard time seeing that something cool, what that would be. But when you can start to make proof of concepts and put real examples in front of people, then the wheels start to turn and it can start to grow from that. So and all of that from a Christian standpoint, besides excellence and honoring the Lord in excellence, even just the yeah, the idea of remembering what the Lord has done, honoring what the Lord has done, whether it's stacking 12 stones in the Old Testament as a story of visualization or memorializing, this is what the Lord did to help us cross this river. And then in the GIS context, to say that these airstrips, just the fact that they exist, and many times villages took years, if not decades, to build those airstrips by hand, and that's a testament to the work that the Lord is doing. So.
May I follow up, Frank? How did you convince MAF to allow you to plunder all that they do for GIS? Because I don't know that how long did it take them to understand that this might actually be useful?
Well, it was very helpful to have a good boss that could see the vision and the potential, right? David's been an amazing person to work with, and they've done a lot of amazing work prior to me getting there, be it with Power BI or other visualization tools. And it's super new at MAF, in my opinion. Like, I don't know, I've worked with a lot of really big organizations that have been doing similar stuff for 20 years or more. And at MAF, this is all really, really new stuff. But I think, we've done this kind of relatively low cost investment. I mean, we've spent less than $10,000 on Esri software, and MAF spends a lot of money on software to run airplanes and all that kind of stuff. So that's been kind of a drop in the bucket. And then I think we've been able to show practical use cases, but that is what I've been doing for 20 years of my life, is going out and selling GIS to other organizations and showing them, hey, what if you had this component and this component, you put it together and you could see this cool thing? Is that something you're interested in? And, so it's kind of been my business for 20 or more years of demonstrating that, be it at Indian tribes or other organizations. I don't know. What's your take on that, David?
Yeah, I think a low capital investment. By no means do we have, a significant R&D or an innovation, line item. But when you can set aside a reasonable amount of money and be able to spin actual use cases, actual examples in people's hands, and then staying very focused on those kind of user stories or use cases, because they're sometimes, especially for something as innovative as a visualization that they've never considered even possible, they don't know what they don't know, or they don't know how to ask for, well, could it be this? But if you can start with whatever their use case is, whether it's a threat dashboard of, well, I get a huge CSV file and it takes me a long time to look through all this data. That was literally how the user story was presented to us. And so then you can kind of dissect that a little bit and go, yeah, that would be pretty rough to manually stare at a CSV file. Well, what if it was in a geographic context? Well, I do want to know if it's near some of our airstrips. And so you can kind of go on that journey and then prototype and say, all right, how about this? And they go, oh man, that's awesome, but I really don't like X, Y, and Z. Okay, then you iterate on X, Y, and Z. And so kind of that basic agile mindset, but also starting with things that matter to the organization. I think from a nerd standpoint, visualization can we can pursue visualization for the sake of visualization, and And if it doesn't speak to a core need or a core value of the organization, then it could quickly become, hey, stop, like this isn't valuable, let's do something else. So making sure that sometimes our nerdness doesn't get too much in the way of providing value in the right areas.
I think one really powerful thing that David did was, I don't know how many months I was into the job, maybe 3 months into the job, David, and we met with the executive leadership team. So basically the C series, VP series at MAF, and then we did an abbreviated version of what you guys just saw. Hey, this is the thing you could do. This is the thing you could do. This is the thing you can do. And by the time we got to the end of the meeting, David Holston, who's the president of MAF, looked around to each one of his board members and said, what could you do with this thing? And they each came up with like 3 things that they could do with it. And I was just like, all right, we've uncorked the lion here. You know, this is going to be awesome. So I was blown away. So.
I think there's a question from Michael in the chat. So can you describe the geo event part of 11.x and not geo event server? He mentioned.
Right. No, this is a huge thing. So so as I said before, so Esri has geo event. You can go, if you weren't a nonprofit, you too could spend $20,000 to $40,000 and purchase this thing called geo event server, and then that lets you ping something like an API and have your dot move around the map as the taxi moves around, or whatever the use case is, or an airplane in MAF's case. So at 11.1, and I'm going to have Cole join us on the call now because he's the one that had to figure it out. I just went and found the guy at Esri who told me this was a possibility, and then I took the whole wheelbarrow and dumped it on Cole's lap. So Cole, do you mind telling us about that integration in ArcGIS Enterprise that you had to stand up for the real-time plane feed?
Yeah, for sure. Oh, sorry, my voice is all messed up, but I will try to keep this brief. Basically, the ArcGIS Enterprise, there's a developer SDK that you can download and install on your developer machine. And on that machine, you can use what they call the custom data feeds. And I can send documentation on how I did all of this. Basically, you develop JavaScript code on both your server and a laptop, and it can hit APIs and then transmit that information in real time, updating the feature layer as often as you want. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Cole. Yeah, so I mean, the basic gist is, so normally in ArcGIS server, you're talking to an enterprise geodatabase. So it says, so you window into an area, and an ArcGIS Enterprise says, hey, database, tell me what's at this location, and it puts a point on the map, right? This just allows you something else to talk to, so you can talk to an API that has, GeoJSON in it or whatever, or convert it to GeoJSON and then display it on the map. So yeah, it takes that whole geo event thing out. You don't really have rollback. It's really what you can see right here, right now. And so having implemented geo event other places, there's some greater capability that's available, but this is a really very low documented thing. Like I had to go around roundy rounds at Esri saying, I heard this is a capability. Oh, no, that's not a capability. You have to go out and purchase geo event. No, you can't do that. And then I finally found the dude that implemented it at Esri, that's on the development team there, and he walked us through getting it all set up, and it's doing what it's supposed to.
Okay. Did this answer your question, Michael?
Yes, it did. Thank you. I just had a thought. You could, I suppose, with the API calls, also push the data into a database, and then you would have a rollback. But that's a whole nother kettle of fish, right?
Right. I was thinking of that last night when I woke up at 3 a.m. Yeah, that's the kind of things I dream about.
Oh,
that's
man,
the way God
man.
made me.
You're my man. You're my man.
Okay, and there's also a suggestion by KY that we could, within the group, we could have a discussion about how we could approach large organizations, for instance, like World Vision or compassion about how we could support them also. And I think that that would also be nice to have that kind of discussions. And by the way, I did find the quote from Tucker, so I put it in the chat. And what I really also liked in her description is the impact MAF is making for missionary work, because in the past people had to travel for months, and also they didn't have much. So they didn't have access to medical aid, etc., etc. And MAF really is making a difference in the, and also a number of other organizations, of course, and that also helps to speed up the work in telling the gospel, and also working among indigenous people. So I think that's really great, and thank you very much for your enthusiastic nerd talk about GIS, but also about leveraging this to MAF and in spreading the gospel. I'm looking if there are some final remarks. Okay, no, there's something about from Michael about Geo event. So that's even more nerd talk. Then I really would like to thank you both, David and Frank, for providing this webinar. And next time we will have Joseph Kursky from Esri, and he will do a webinar on geographical information systems in education. So I think that's also a little bit of the Joseph's baby, talking about education, but I'm really curious about this, and I will I've just posted the description, and it will be in the Google Mail group, etc., etc. So if you feel like joining us, please feel welcome. So, and thank you very much for the really nice presentation. Okay, so thank you all for joining us, and see you next time.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate it.